Representing the Steyer campaign is Wendy Millet. She is the director of TomKat Ranch, which is their ranch in California. It's a cattle ranch with a mission to raise healthy food on working lands in a way that regenerates the planet and inspires others into action. She has worked on ranches in Wyoming, Montana, at Policy Think Tank in Washington, D.C., and in conservation for 20 years, focused on economic solutions to working lands. She serves on the boards of the Western Landowners Alliance and the California Council of Land Trust, and is a co-founder of Women in Ranching, activating women's voices in agriculture, and Gallup Ventures, LLC, an engine-guided leadership program. Welcome, Wendy Millet. I'm excited again to dive in. To be clear and upfront with you all, we know each other, and I've been up to their ranch, so I just wanted to make sure you know that we know each other, so there's no secrets out there. Yeah, transparency, just honesty. So I want to first give you an opportunity to share with the audience, in lieu of all of the things that have been discussed today, when we look at the trade war, to intensive drought and flooding issues, to all of these issues with cost and input cost increases, the crisis that the farmers are facing. I wanted to give you a chance to share with this audience in the world who's watching really what the Steyer campaign has. We've heard a lot that Steyer's up for climate and ready to do something. I would love for you to share with this audience how that applies and will apply for farmers, and really what the Steyer campaign is about on that front.
Great. Thanks, Vinian, and hello, everybody. So my name is Wendy Millet, as Vinian said, and I am really excited to be here in Iowa, meet a bunch of folks who have been in the regenerative agriculture movement and helping set the stage through this campaign, so thank you. I'm here as a volunteer to the Tom Steyer 2020 campaign in my personal capacity. In my professional life, though, I get to serve as the director of the ranch at the Ranch Educational Foundation. So for the last 7 years, I've gotten to work with Tom and Kat on this ranch, which originally we said was about sustaining the planet. But 10 years ago, that was the word. And as it turns out, regenerative agriculture, as it's evolved, is really more what we're working on. And Tom and Kat are passionate partners with us in the work at the ranch. It's an 1,800-acre cattle ranch out on the California coast. They bought it in actually 2002, so it's been quite a while, and have been partnering with rural America, our local agricultural community, to address climate change issues through the vehicle of the ranch. Last night I was thinking about how Iowa has become this breadbasket that it is, and the history of agriculture in our country, and so much of it is about common cause to feed people in the world. And it's interesting because it feels like the times have changed, and the common cause now is changing, and it's about climate change. But it's also still about food, because we eat 3 meals a day, and agriculture is the dominant way that humans interact with the planet. So our work at the ranch is really focused on a holistic approach and how we can restore water, soil, biodiversity, human health, animal welfare, economic resilience in our community, all at the same time. They're all interconnected, as you know, as we've talked about. So that's really the big opportunity that we have and what we've been working on at the ranch.
Great. And just to check in, not to make any assumptions of the thinking, but where someone with the wealth of Mr. Steyer and where he's lived up in California, relatedness, I wanted you to just talk a little bit about what we touched upon earlier, is this theme of something greater than some of our more petty divisions that might arise. What is the commitment for the Steyer campaign, and how are they addressing the current division in our country and bringing people together for this bigger cause, and really looking at this as a potential for unification? How is that working, especially around the message of how farmers are going to be included in that?
Yeah, so one of the things that we're most excited about at the ranch is innovation and getting to trial new things, new approaches, new practices. The principles of regenerative agriculture, as you know, are consistent. They're applied differently in different places, but the principles, whether you're in Iowa or California, where it only rains 7 or 8 months a year, they're still the same. And so getting a chance to explore on the ground at the ranch what kinds of practices work, whether it's compost, whether it's biofungal inoculants to activate soil that's tired from years of a singular use. Those are the kind of things. There's so much innovation around the world, but farmers and ranchers tend to be, I'm speaking to probably some of you here who are farmers and ranchers, we have a lot to be responsible for all day long running an operation. And so having the time to look up and think about what people are learning in other parts of the world and how they apply to our ecosystem and our biodiversity and our average rainfall, that's the kind of thing that we're getting to do. We get to bring people to the ranch as well and learn from each other and share best practices. So that's, and share what we're learning and what we're failing at.
Yeah. I love that you brought that up. I'm gonna throw a random question here just because it came up from what you were describing. There's a great phrase in regenerative agriculture, which many of you are probably familiar with, which just goes like this: context, context, context. The more you get into the regenerative agriculture movement, healthy soil movement, you'll probably hear that a few too many times. So in that respect, when we talk about climate, the automatic jump for most folks nowadays is this idea of too much CO2 in our atmosphere causing the blanket heating. But when we talk about climate from things that affect macroclimate, when we expand how much bare ground is in a county, drastically, if there's 90% bare ground for half the year, we're gonna impact that climate, that microclimate, and then if we expand beyond that, impacting macroclimate. So inside of this context conversation, where do you feel like, with a push towards regenerative agriculture, the Steyer campaign might be saying, look, maybe it's not just all about carbon sequestration and quote unquote what we think of as climate, but there are these other things that are actually tangibly more impactful for farmers. So what have you found on the ranch as a whole that you all have said, hey, you know what, when it comes to our bee populations, our bird populations, our pest need or decrease of needing pesticides or anything, what are some other things that have happened when there has been a focus on measuring carbon, but some of these other benefits? Have any of them reared their head as actually, wow, this is something that's universally much more tangible and immediate for people?
Yeah, so it's been fun. When TomKat bought the ranch, it had been managed as a pretty standard cattle operation for a long time. So the switch was to start grazing the cows in a holistic sense, where we're moving them regularly, sometimes even every day, and trying then to see what kind of benefits we're seeing for, as I said, water, biodiversity, carbon, soil, taste and quality of even the beef. And we've been measuring a fair amount of those things to try and see the difference. For example, some of what we have been really happy about, we've increased the perennial grasses. We have 75 pastures. We've broken up the ranch, not literally, but sort of the way you do planned grazing. And we originally had, when I started there, 5 pastures that had perennial grasses detectable, and now we have 70 of the 75 pastures that all have native perennial grasses. And hopefully people understand the difference between annual grasses and native, but I shouldn't assume that because I didn't know that for a while. And native perennial grasses could have really, really deep roots. And annual grasses
She said deep roots, but the microphone got too far from her.
Sorry, I said this way, deep roots. And annual grasses have, can have really, really short roots. So water infiltration, liquid carbon pathway, the exchange of sugars, all of the things that can happen when the roots get deeper is a great example. The biodiversity's changed. We measure birds and we've even done taste tests on the animals to see if we're seeing a difference.
Right. So I just wanted to check into that because of the myriad of benefits that do occur when we're regenerating. an ecosystem. And I just want to point out that personally, I feel like I have had an aha moment, multiple, over the 7 years of researching healthy soil and regenerative agriculture. And I personally think it's important for people who are leading our country to be able to understand the depth and the depth of the opportunity for this. And I've been pleasantly surprised and really inspired by the depth of a lot of the plans of the candidates who are running for president right now, of how in-depth they have been talking about the need for supporting agriculture in this kind of new frontier of regenerating land. So I want to get more specific on, and you might not be able to answer this, you can just say pass, because you might, as a farm manager, might not know this exactly, but in the first 100 days of office, what could we expect in terms of looking at contracts for farmers, looking at the trade wars things? What kind of things are we looking from the Steyer campaign of them wanting to jump into immediately for farmers on everything from the dairy crisis to commodity crisis, all this stuff? Like what can we anticipate seeing with the Steyer presidency?
I don't know as many details as other folks in the campaign, but I can say that I have read the climate plan, the justice plan, and prioritizing programs to support regenerative agriculture, soil building, training for young farmers, incentives for soil building practices. Those are all things that are in the plan, and I think all of those are the kind of things that make a difference. As many people in this room know, the practices are out there, so we just have to get them onto the ground. And so how do you transition farmers into and make it possible on an economic basis for people to get into and change their business practices? I was talking at lunch with some people, and we were talking about that being the #1 challenge. So if we can help that happen, that would be a big difference. And just sort of tying that question to the one before that, you said that you've had some amazing moments, and one of those sort of statistics that always stays with me is it's an NRCS statistic about how 1% increase in soil organic matter can increase water holding capacity on 1 acre by 16,000 to 27,000, depending on what you read, but gallons an acre. So that's just amazing. Like if you think about flood protection, if you think about, dealing with drought, there's just, I think your question was about like what are the other benefits of changing practices. That's going to be all for obviously whole communities, but it's really going to affect a farmer's bottom line. If, for example, your farm is flooding, and mine isn't, right? And what's the difference? Well, I changed my soil building practices, and I created that sponginess of the soil. It held water.
Yeah. So on that, as it's okay, like you're not the policy expert from the campaign, but what I'm hearing is that we would expect investment and incentives for farmers on a major scale, I'm guessing, so that there is a major incentive or abilities, even subsidies, moving over towards supporting training, access to infrastructure, et cetera. And that's what I found in the strategy as well, in the plan. Jumping to a question on the economy, it says FDR said, "A nation that destroys its soil destroys itself. And history has shown that over 20 civilizations fell because their land turned to dust. Regarding the economy, healthy soil will not only avert the cost of disaster in a major way, but will also bolster the economy beyond that in our rural communities, creating jobs and businesses all across our food, fiber, and fuel production industries. How will President Steyer focus on soil health and fertility as a key strategy for long-term economic security and true prosperity for all Americans?"
That's a long question,
Yeah.
Ian.
I fit my statements into my questions, if you didn't notice already.
Well, I think hopefully everybody can think about the timing of, or the convergence, I would say, of a few things. One, Tom's been a business person his whole life. He's a very smart man. And he's had a ranch since 2002, and so he's seen firsthand, close up, some of the challenges. And we do run it as an educational ranch, as I said, but we spend a lot of time looking at what people who don't have the same means that we do, what are the bottlenecks, what are the challenges, how can we address them, how can we apply our resources to actually address those. And we keep coming back to regenerative agriculture because it is a solution to multiple crises or multiple threats of our time. If you could just, by changing practices, increase your ranch's bottom line and by increasing your soil health, improving your water infiltration, improving your biodiversity. Like, wow, improving the nutrient density of your food. What an amazing opportunity. So if that's his number one thing and that's all he talks about, we may be able to get quite far down to where we're trying to get.
Awesome. We'll take one question from the audience, and then we're going to wrap up with this one. We have anyone from the audience who might have a question for the Steyer campaign? And hopefully we can do this quick. Right there. Someone had a question? All right here in the front.
Chris.
Chet.
I'm an independent pig farmer. I'd like to know what he's going to do about, or try and get Congress to do, about antitrust and competition in agriculture. There's no markets anymore. There's no independent markets. The packers manage the markets.
Great question.
Yeah, so as Finian said, I'm not the expert on the policy issues, so I'm going to refer you to someone on the campaign team who's here. But I would say what I know and what I'm excited about and what we've talked about from our ranch's perspective is really pushing for investing in innovation and new markets and supporting, the infrastructure that needs to happen. It's true in alternative energy too, right? We have to sort of rebuild a whole different way of doing things, and so I think that's going to take investment, and that's really the central theme that I can speak to. So I think.
Yeah, just on that, what I have read of the plan on the Steyer side is a lot of that market development, especially for farmers to be able to diversify and start to find markets and not be strangled. I mean, the truth is they are aware very much of this situation with the control right now. It's basically a blockout that certain people get advantage and other people don't. So from what I've read, they are very aware of it and looking at the markets of how to diversify the markets for that. So.
Yeah, I was going to say, even in the Bay Area, from our ranches work, we've been working at looking at some of the bottlenecks, processing bottlenecks for the beef and getting into the markets. It's a small scale thing, but sometimes these pilot projects at a small local scale help to scale up and give us ideas for how to take it to a next level. So, and it also brings the resources, the human resources and the innovation investment into that. Because usually the smart ideas are in the room. It's just a matter of getting enough critical mass of people together to actually help them do it. I bet you have some ideas, right? So if we sat down and talked about it, and I think that's the thing you'll find in the Tom Steyer campaign is Tom really is curious about learning what people want to do and investing in communities on the ground and letting the people speak. We went to an event recently with him, and he just kept asking questions for people. What should we do? What should we do? And I find that welcome because I think there is so much, especially in agricultural communities. We know what we need to do. So Tom, I think, would be a great partner for this issue, and I hope everyone will join him in February 3rd.
Awesome. Thank you, Wendy Millet. Let's give it up. Thank you so much.